Recently, in a session, a client said, I know what I need to do. I just need to try harder. And I said, well, let's not rely on willpower. And he said, why not? So, this video is about why not, why willpower doesn't work to create lasting change, and why there is a more lasting, more profound type of change that we can access instead. Let's dive in. Okay, so this client wanted to have more space for high level strategic work, but he couldn't stop saying yes to the lower priority work. In his mind, he just needed to be more disciplined about saying no, and he wanted me to hold him accountable to that. Now, setting intention and having accountability are good, but usually if we're consistently taking action that's misaligned with what we want, there's some sort of underlying reason for it. And using willpower is like constantly fighting against that underlying reason. It always takes your energy, and maybe sometimes you'll win and that will feel good, but it'll always be there. That battle will always be there. Instead, if we learn the underlying reason that's blocking you from showing up how you want, then we can start to work with it instead of fighting against it. The trick is, high performing people are often really good at discipline and willpower and pushing through. So it can feel really counterintuitive at first to not do that, but it will pay dividends, as you will see in this example. So, okay, as a refresher, my client wants to say no to the low priority work so that he can create more space for that higher priority, more strategic work, the work he wants to be doing. So, the question I became curious about in our session is, what's so important to him about saying yes to this lower priority work? Something deep down must be really important to him because he keeps doing it, and I trust that it's for some sort of reason. So I asked this client to imagine a situation where someone is asking him to do this lower priority work and to imagine saying no. This is a good way to trigger that underlying reason to reveal itself. So my client kind of sat with himself, imagined this, and was quiet for a moment. And then he said that he felt embarrassed, like, oh, I think I'm so important. I need to be doing this more strategic work, which was interesting to me. So I said, embarrassed? What do you mean? And we kind of went on like this with him closing his eyes and telling me what was coming up and me asking questions about it until he said that he felt like spending time on this strategic work was silly, like such a luxury. It's not real work, it's irresponsible, he said. And this kind of surprised him. He didn't realize he thought this. The surprise is important because these underlying reasons are not conscious to us, they live outside of our conscious awareness. And so when we discover one, it usually is surprising. So I asked him, what's surprising you? And he shared that an image was coming to mind of someone he hadn't thought of in a really long time. It was a family friend from when he was younger, who was this kind of icky executive type who was always talking about his work and how important it was, but was never actually doing any work. And he remembered when he was younger really not wanting to be like that person. Now, he laughed when he was sharing this. He was like, this feels crazy. I haven't thought of this person in so long. I can't believe this is underlying my my fear of why I don't want to say no to this lower priority work. And so we spent the rest of our session seeing if we could imagine a way to say no to lower priority work and a way to do the higher level work that felt high integrity to him. And when we talked again a couple weeks later, he said that it had felt much easier for him to say no and much easier for him to spend time on the higher level work. And it was really energizing for him. So basically, by exploring the underlying reason why he kept saying yes, he was able to discover this new fear, this image he had of this icky, irresponsible executive type, and to realize that he could actually do the thing he wanted in a way that felt high integrity to him. Now, imagine for a moment that we had spent our session focused on willpower or on tactics to help him either say no more easily or block time on his calendar to do this high level strategic work. Now, those are good tactics, but they probably wouldn't have actually done that much for him because they didn't address his underlying reason, right? So, why don't we rely on willpower? Because it's not actually consistently effective and because it takes a lot of our energy to be constantly fighting ourselves. Instead, if we can identify that underlying reason, the reason that makes it hard for us to show up how we want, then we can work with it. So the way we want to show up becomes easy. What I find is hardest for people to do here is to actually discover the underlying reason. Because that reason does live outside of our conscious awareness, we can't really think our way to it. We can't logic out the answer. We actually need to discover it by seeing what feelings and fears are emerging for us and asking about those feelings, asking about those fears. So it's much easier to do with a practitioner, but you can do it alone. So the tactic that I think is most accessible to do on your own is to imagine doing the thing that you want to do but are having trouble doing. Imagine actually doing it. Really let yourself imagine doing it and then see what sort of fear or discomfort it brings up. That fear that it brings up, that's going to be your trailhead that will kind of lead you to your underlying reason. What I love about all of this is that when you discover that underlying reason, it all makes perfect sense. Like, I don't think that we act out of our own self interest. Like, we really are well intended. We're trying to do good for ourselves, we're trying to help ourselves. And so sometimes it can feel like we're acting irrationally when we're not able to do the thing we want to do. But then when you discover the reason, it all makes perfect sense. So if instead you can kind of go in with that knowing, like, okay, the way I'm acting must make sense. I just don't get why yet. Then you can use that to kind of hunt for the underlying reason to make it all make sense. I hope that this has been a helpful example, maybe resonates a bit. And I'm going to share more examples soon. So hopefully you'll watch.